Welcome back to Things You Don't Know, where yesterday's media meets tomorrow's nostalgia. I'm Dr. William Weaver, rewinding time one tape at a time alongside my perfectly synchronized co hosts.
Dr. Sean Deneen here. And Dr. Weaver, I'm very pleased to say today's story is dear to my heart. It's one of magnets, memories, and mixtapes.
And I'm Chandler Foster, here to hit record because today we're talking about the cassette tape. That tiny plastic little rectangle that recorded our hearts, our hits, and sometimes our heartbreaks.
It started back in 1963. Well, I remember that time. In the labs of Philips in Eindhoven, the Netherlands. Lou Ottens, a Dutch engineer, tired of tangled reel to reel messes and created something smaller, simpler, a pocket sized cartridge with magnetic tape sealed inside.
Odins wanted recording to be more democratic. No spools, no threading, no fancy engineers needed. Just push, click, and play.
And he nailed it. The compact cassette was portable, durable, and cheap to make. By the late 1960s, cars even had cassette decks. Living rooms had portable recorders, and the mixtape was quietly waiting to be born.
Yeah, Philips freely licensed the format, a radical move to let anyone build decks and players. So, Sony, Panasonic, and TDK jumped in. By the mid 1970s, it wasn't just music, it was identify, identity, have it on tape.
You could do whatever you wanted. You could record your favorite radio show, confess your crush, or bootleg a concert, all with that lovely red record button and a finger hovering over stop in case your parents came in talking to your girlfriend.
Let's talk about the mixtape revolution. Now, here's where things get personal. The mixtape wasn't just a playlist, it was a love letter that you could rewind.
Exactamundo. Side A was the heartbeat, oftentimes. Side B, the confession. Each track placement mattered. Opening with The Police, maybe? You were thoughtful. Closing with The Cure, perhaps? You were in deep.
And it wasn't limited to romance. Mixtapes fueled youth culture. Traded in school hallways, I remember that. Passed around like coded diaries. DJs built the early history of hip hop on cassette decks, looping beats and their rhymes.
And who and their mama could forget about the boombox era? Big, loud, and unapologetic. The street symphony of the 1980s. The cassette made music mobile before the smartphone ever buzzed.
Yeah, that's true. Cassettes also birthed the underground. Punk zines came with demo tapes. Indie bands mailed their work across oceans in padded envelopes. The cassette democratized distribution. No record label required.
In many ways, the mixtape was the first social media post. It was personal, it was curated, it was meant to be shared.
Yeah, okay, so the Walkman comes into play here. In 1979, in Tokyo, Sony releases the Walkman, a sleek blue and silver box that let you take your soundtrack anywhere.
For the first time ever, it turned music inward. You didn't need a concert in a hall. For the first time, listening wasn't a shared experience. It was personal, it was private. Your headphones became walls and windows all at once.
You could jog to Springsteen, study to Miles Davis, or you could even brew to the Smiths, all while blocking out the world. The cassette became a companion.
Yeah, and it may have also contributed a little bit to social isolation in a way. By 1983, more than 50 million Walkmans had been sold. It was liberation in stereo, small enough to fit in a pocket, big enough to change culture.
As it often does when something new comes around, even language changed. The word Walkman became shorthand for self expression, a symbol of youth, independence, and volume.
Now let's take a dive into the digital shift because, like all tech, the rewind button eventually hit stop.
The 1990s brought the compact disc, good old CDs, shiny, digital, and perfect sound forever. Cassette hiss just couldn't compete.
By the year 2000, CD sales had eclipsed cassettes tenfold. Auto manufacturers dropped their tape decks just as they had 8 tracks 20 years earlier. Blank tapes gathered dust besides the batteries and AA chargers.
Still, though, the cassette tape refused to die quietly. Kids recorded off radio into the very end. Bootlegged concerts, field interviews, even sermons lived on magnetic tape well into the 2010s.
And during the early MP3 era, nostalgia flickered. Indie bands started releasing limited run cassettes again, not for fidelity, but for feel.
There's something very grounding about hearing that soft click, the whir of the spools, the imperfection that feels beautiful and human.
In the United States, cassette tapes were a rebellion, but elsewhere, they were revolution.
In the Middle East, the 1980s cassette underground carried banned sermons and political messages. In the Soviet Union, contraband Western rock circulated on tapes dubbed again and again and again.
In Africa, cassette kiosks provided collective entertainment and empowered local musicians who couldn't afford studio pressings. In India, the cassette dethroned vinyl entirely. T Series built an empire from magnetic tape.
Even today, tape culture persists in niche scenes. Punk, vaporwave, lo-fi hip hop, cassette duplication plants still hum quietly in Detroit, Tokyo, and Nairobi.
And in Japan, of course, cassette bars and tape cafes have emerged. Places where you can sit with a coffee and listen to a curated mixtape on vintage decks.
As a historian, I love it. Nostalgia with a rewind button.
Yes.
Indeed, beneath the plastic shell. Well, before I even go there, I wanted to say that another culture was sincerely impacted by pop American music, pop American and English music, and the cassette and, of course, CDs also played a great role in that. And I'm talking about the Ukraine, something that's been in the news. Really, it has been posited, and I do believe that part of the revolution in the separation from the Soviet Union in Ukraine had to do with them listening to American pop music. So it has had an impact more than we sometimes think. At any rate, Beneath the plastic shell lies magnetism. We're talking again about cassette tapes. The tape itself is coated with iron oxide particles. When you record, sound waves are turned into tiny magnetic imprints, invisible but physical nonetheless.
I'm very pleased to hear what you said, Dr. Weaver, about the use of cassettes to promote American culture through music. It sounds similar to something you told me about Ukrainians, even in the Soviet period, celebrating Thanksgiving. The
Yes, you're really right, Dr. Deneen, and that tradition has continued after Ukraine gained their freedom. And I imagine, even while their freedom is being challenged, it still continues. So it's really interesting. So I've been asked by several Ukrainians for recipes for turkey and stuffing, and it really is.
Uh, oh, yeah, for their Thanksgiving celebrations.
Yes, indeed. You're right, Dr. Deneen.
Check out our holidays podcast to learn a little more about celebrations and culture. But getting back to cassettes, those tiny fluctuations of magnetism, millions of them happen per second. They're what give a tape its warmth. Analog sound isn't perfect, but it breathes, it's human.
Which is why audiophiles still chase it to this day. That hiss, that flutter, the imperfections are part of the emotion. It's the difference between a live concert and a studio track.
And unlike digital, tape degrades gracefully. A little wear adds some character, a kind of audible patina, if you will.
That's why, ladies and gentlemen, for all our streaming and all our algorithms, nothing replaces the ritual of flipping a tape.
Absolutely not. Believe it or not, the cassette is back, at least a little bit.
Artists like Billie Eilish, The Weeknd, and even Taylor Swift have released albums on cassette. Independent labels press them into small batches for fans who crave something tangible.
Cassette sales actually doubled between 2015 and 2020. They're still tiny compared to vinyl, which has had its own renaissance, but they're growing, not because of convenience, but because of connection.
Here's also the art form: unique cases, neon shelves, hand drawn inserts. Each tape becomes a keepsake, a story you can hold in the palm of your hand.
In an age of infinite playlists, a cassette demands patience. You can't skip as easily. You just have to listen.
As a person with an exceptionality, I can relate because sometimes even things I'm quite able to do, I have to do slower. So maybe that's why cassettes are finding new life. Just like there's some similar nostalgia for VHS tapes, because slowing down is the new rebellion.
And think about it. The cassette bridged worlds. It carried revolutions, romances, road trips, and teenage angst, all wound up in magnetic thread.
At its core, it democratized recording, preserved memories, and taught us that sometimes the most meaningful sound isn't crystal clear.
And you didn't need Wi-Fi, just a pencil to rewind.
Oh, yeah, I remember doing that many's a time.
Oh yeah, I do too. It's actually quite fun.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. Well, we could go on and wax poetic about this, and perhaps you will. Maybe it'll bring to mind some things for you. Maybe you'll dredge out an old cassette tape and look at it and say, "Oh, I remember her or him." And when you got a mixtape, I've given out a few of those. But this has been Things You Don't Know.
Where every sound has a story.
And sometimes it's on side A, and sometimes it's on side B.
And every memory, no matter how magnetic, eventually fades, but never disappears completely. So keep your tapes close and your stories rewound. There's always another side waiting to play. Insertion point at start. Bye for now.
Goodbye, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you've enjoyed this.